Welcome to Morse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin can and string, the very tired and East Coast version of our analyst. He writes for the Daily Norseman along with other blogs on the internet and is a useful human. Please give it up for Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. But I'm in Vermont. I'm happy, and I have permanently been upheld the title Useful Human, so, things are looking up.
You've won that title. I don't know who you battled it for, but you won that title, and I feel like this is going to follow you into the postseason.
Excellent. I've got momentum.
It's exactly. It's like a good Week 16, Week 17 win, or it's like an ACL tear. It's just going to follow you into next year.
Oh, those are nice contrast of analogies.
It's just going to follow you. That's all it's going to do, for better or for worse. Welcome to the show. We have lots to talk about. We dominated Chicago at TCF Bank this week. Lots to talk about, lots to break down, and the general theme is that Cutler got smoked, and we're happy about it. Also, our offense really showed up. Teddy threw for 4 touchdowns, ran in for 1, which apparently we haven't had that much of a run-up of the score since the first time we ever played the Bears, which is kind of cool. We haven't done that to the Bears since we first played them. That was a nice little...
Mike Ditka was playing in that game, which is the reason he actually hates the Vikings more than he hates the Packers.
Exactly. It's sometimes it's nice to just get an origin story in a comic book and just figure out why the supervillain hates us so much. It's good. But we have lots to talk about, including we're also going to break down do a little preview of the Giants game while we're at it, since we've got kind of a short week and don't want to end up recording 2 shows for you on Christmas. So here we go. Lots to talk about. Well, let's first start off with a donation. As you know, this show is ad-free. We like to keep it ad-free. We don't want to have bad quality on here. We don't want to have you listen to 2 minutes of ads for products you probably don't really care about. We appreciate any sort of help that you guys can throw at us. You can give to us in 2 different ways. You can give to us through PayPal, and the link to that is at the bottom of the NorseCodePodcast.com website. Just a little button that says donate. The other way you can do that is by going to patreon.com/NorseCode. You can give whatever you'd like. It's a sustaining donation. It's much like NPR. And just help us out. We're just trying to keep the lights on. And speaking of keeping the lights on, Isaac Huntley, who is a frequent person who tweets at us, is our donor of the week, who sends us the message, "This is a tangible way to express gratitude for Teddy's performance. Also, thanks for the 2 a week." Thank you, Isaac. Thank you.
It's because of people like you that we can do it 2 times a week.
Exactly. Just helping with the server space, helping with the website cost. Anything helps, really. If you'd like to throw your $3.50, go ahead and send it to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. A little PayPal thing. So, we also have a little bit of other news to talk about before we get into the show. Last week, we had a question about the Morse code in the opening of the show. And I was not on the show, but according to this particular listener, you guys both punted on it, didn't know, didn't care. Well,
I didn't say we didn't care. It was just very difficult to find out because, so if you listen to it and you look up or even if you try to enter it into one of those online translators, it just goes way too fast. So someone who's not used to listening to Morse code probably just can't do it. And I guessed that the first letter was F. We'll find out how right I was as we continue this segment in the email that we got.
So, a reader by the name of Matt sent in a message, said, "Thanks for the great work on the podcast. Started listening this season and really enjoying your analysis and conversations, particularly when you have invited beat writers who cover the opposing teams. In your Bears preview podcast, you punted on answering the question of what the Morse code reads during the show intro. I'll handle the return. Presentation. The code is indeed fast. I'd been trying to figure it out over the last few episodes as it whizzed by. So, presentation. I suppose that makes sense. Although you could have told me that it was kick away from Hester, and I totally would have just like ran with it. Like, oh, that's fine. I totally
Yeah,
get
no,
it.
it makes sense. It's a little boring as a reveal, but I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised that it's a word. My guess is like it's like lifted off of like an actual like movie reel of Morse code, like a wartime movie or whatever. And like this is what they do right before they actually give the actual message or something along those lines. That's my guess, but who knows?
And again, not based on anything, but that is our guess. But cool. So we know what that question. We know what the answer to that question is. Apparently, now it is presentation. I feel like I feel better knowing that, and that this will probably be the last time you hear it for a little bit because next show, the Christmas show, which is going to be coming out here in a couple days, is going to feature the new Norse Code theme song, which you guys mentioned briefly on the last show.
Yeah, it's a blast.
There's yes, it's a blast for some of us anyway. We'll do a little clip to start the show, and then I'll actually include the whole thing at the end because it makes fun of me during the parts I'm not going to have in the opening. So I feel like everyone should really enjoy that and just stick to the end. It's like waiting to the end of the credits for an Avengers movie or something. Like there's just a little extra. So good for them. So we beat the Bears, and we beat them quite handedly. Teddy Bridgewater had a great game, has had two really good games in a row. 5 touchdowns he was involved with, 4 thrown. One was that interesting jump that could have gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, there were like there were a couple of moments where you were kind of concerned, and I think the biggest moment, aside from like the Adrian Peterson injury, was probably when Bridgewater jumped into the end zone, and you were like, I am not so sure about what's happening here. Worked out, but it could have been a Rosencopter
I was
situation.
gonna say he was going for the full on Sage Rosenfels there, and if there's one thing you don't do is you don't go full Rosencopter. You do not do that. But had a great game. A couple questions though off of it. AJ on Twitter asks, "What's changed in Teddy the past 2 games? Is this here to stay?"
Yeah, well, so actually, I think that not much has changed with Teddy so much as it has with a lot of the play calling. I think that that's actually sort of the primary, and I think, was one of the bigger things that changed for Teddy in the last 5 games of last year is that the play calling changed to something that's not just more comfortable for Teddy and it involves shorter passes and stuff like that, but is actually also just reflective of modern NFL offenses because you take a look at some of the things some of these really good offenses around the NFL are doing. I think like aside from Arizona and Pittsburgh, which yes, they are pretty good offenses. You see a lot of these mid-range throws, a lot of these slants, and a lot of these 3 and 5 step drops that allow the quarterback to when they're in rhythm, get rid of the ball quickly. Last year, when he hit the stride, it also coincided not just with a change in play calling, but also with I don't want to say better, but like sharper and cleaner mechanics where he quickened his release and stuff like that. That helped. This year, that's actually these last 2 games. I would say maybe that's a little true. Maybe that's a function of his footwork and his rhythm in these 3 and 5 step drops. But I think the primary thing is the play calling. So I think Teddy is making decisions about as well as ever. He's playing under pressure about as well as ever. But in these last 2 games, he's playing a kind of game that's more suited to what the offensive line can do and what he's comfortable with, and that's kind of revealing itself in terms of his play on the field.
Yeah, he's definitely throwing with confidence out there too. It's interesting that the thing that we've been calling for, or the fans have been calling for pretty much all year, shorter passes, different types of routes, as oddly enough has been working. But it's not just simply calling that. It's also going to end up being certain players have to start stepping up too. And of all people, Greg Wallace started to look good. And like I don't know what I'm watching there. But second question was from Tommy Gunn, who asks, "Is Teddy improving like he did last year, feeding off the better offensive line play, or was this a subpar Bears performance?"
Actually, I do think that there's a lot to be said about, the poor play of the Bears. I know that one of the Bears players, I think it was Pernell McPhee, said, Teddy didn't play well. We just played so badly. It looked good for him, and he tackled so poorly. And I initially retweeted it by making fun of him for losing. But there's something to be said that a lot of the gaudy statistics that Teddy put up, which is not to say his accuracy was bad. I'll talk about that in a second. But, a lot of the gaudy statistics that Teddy put up, some of that can be attributed to how poorly the Bears played, especially on the back end, with the linebackers and the cornerbacks. You take a look at, some of Jerick McKinnon's runs and his touchdown. And for sure, a lot of that has to do with the poor tackling. And, Teddy got a lot of credit for that because they're passes, right? And we saw a couple of that, but I think that there are also instances where Teddy played really well with pinpoint accuracy. As you were saying, the Mike Wallace adjustment on that, I think it was a 34-yard pass. The Mike Wallace adjustment was also a very, very well thrown ball, to the outside shoulder, to a shoulder away from the two defensive backs. It was perfectly placed, perfectly timed, and it was a really good pass. You could also take a look at the Stephon Diggs touchdown, which granted it's only 15 yards in the stat sheet, but it was near the back of the end zone. It was closer to a 20-yard pass,
Yep.
but it's perfectly accurate. So there are instances where Teddy certainly created whatever he wanted to create, but there are also instances where maybe the yards per attempt are a little bit inflated by how poorly the Bears played.
Yeah, it's not like this was the Panthers defense or something. It was an okay defense, but we just destroyed them. And the Teddy pass to Diggs in the corner of the end zone, the little basket catch, was just so pretty to watch. Like
Oh
Diggs,
no, it was beautiful, and Diggs was ecstatic about it. He couldn't stop talking about the perfection of the pass. He's talking about how we call it a front pocket pass, where you keep your pens and your notepads front pocket, which I thought was pretty good. What's actually interesting is Teddy may not have thrown a single inaccurate pass the entire game. He had two drops of one batted pass, and every ball hits somebody's hands, right? And the batted pass, you kind of want to for the most PFF takes those away in their accuracy rating. I think in this case, sometimes batted passes are the function of the quarterback. I think Matt Castle comes to mind, from that perspective. But I think in this case, I think it was McPhee this time. He made an astounding play with not just good timing, but great athleticism. So I think that wasn't on Teddy. I think there was a Zach Line drop and a Matt Asiata drop. If I remember correctly, there were definitely two drops. And then he completed the rest of his passes. So they all were on target. I will say there were occasional instances where, the ball placement wasn't the best. I think one of McKinnon's excellent runs in the ball placement was a little bit too high, but, that's kind of nitpicking at that point. Every ball, was designed for yards after the catch. Every ball hit the receiver in their hands. I mean, it was a 100% accurate game. I mean, how often do you get to say that? So yeah, Teddy definitely created a lot of his own yards.
yeah, I was really impressed with him the entire game. It was just fun to watch Vikings Twitter all of a sudden just become silent from the Teddy haters. Nobody's asking to start Sean Hill to see what we've got or anything like that. Which really, that's where we're at. We're asking for Sean Hill to no. We
But I mean,
have
there are people who are Taylor Heineke fans that want him to start. So sometimes it's Sean Hill is such a bad option that they decide, maybe not Sean Hill this time. Maybe the third string quarterback. What's he got?
yeah. That almost feels a bit like asking for Tebow when you got Brady starting. Like not on that same level, but just like really, you want the third string guy, huh? You realize what he's doing out there. Oh, okay, whatever. Some people's kids. Some people's kids. Next thing we want to talk about though is AP went down with an ankle injury. A guy ended up rolling on him, and he definitely looked like he was in pain. Walked it off, and it turns out it's not going to be as bad. He's not expecting to be missing for the Giants game, which is good. But the question from Carson Jenkins is how stagnant will the offense be Sunday with a healthy Peterson, since they are a run-first football team?
Yeah, it's a pretty good question. So I've always been kind of the opinion that we've kind of blown up the situation about, the offense being only comfortable for one or the other. The idea that, because Peterson can't run out of shotgun and that Teddy's uncomfortable under center, that the offense is never really designed to do one thing or the other. And I think that that's not necessarily accurate, or rather, there's no way we have enough information to say that Peterson is bad at running out of shotgun. That is true. But the statistics in terms of, passing out of center or passing out of shotgun, those are so close that they start to get affected by, situational things. Like maybe they're in shotgun more often, on third down, especially on third and long, and that's going to help your statistics a little bit, right? Or maybe the defense is more likely to read a run on under center, and that's going to affect. There's a couple of things that'll impact the statistics that you can't really compare them. And so the fact that we know that Peterson is bad out of the shotgun doesn't necessitate, us to say, well, if Teddy's uncomfortable under center, maybe the offense just can't gel together. So I don't know that that's ever been the case, but I do think that there's an over reliance of Peterson at times, and he's been having a good year after an unsteady first couple of games. But I don't know, man. The offense looked really good today, and Peterson was kind of missing for some of it. But it did look good while Peterson was still in the game too, right?
Which is the important thing. It's the important thing to point out is that it's not like we were an absolute train wreck until his injury. Like, he was still getting yards, and Adrian has a history with the Bears too of like nearly always getting 100 yards. This was a rarity because he got injured and had to stay out, but he still had like 64, 66 yards or something like that. Like, dude was playing.
Yeah, he had 63 yards. He was better. I think in the first half than the second half. But he was uninjured in the first half.
You got the feeling that in the second half he was basically just seeing what was what he had. He was in there, but he wasn't really playing for keeps. He was just checking out how bad his ankle hurt.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I think I think that there are a couple of things that held the offense back, but I think that Peterson, in terms of the passing game, was not necessarily one of them. But that's not to say I wouldn't listen to arguments. It just didn't seem like that to me. So,
yeah,
I get it, Carson, but maybe it'll be okay.
We might just be okay with Adrian playing for us. Might. But the next thing I want to talk about is the offensive line really was there for Teddy today. A couple cheap shots came through, most notably the one on Teddy's legs that knocked him down pretty good. But he had one sack and 3 hits. Was he just better prepared for running away from him? Because he was still getting pressure. Or was the offensive line coming through?
Yeah, well, I think that there are a couple of things. I think the first thing is, the shorter passing game, takes a load off of the offensive line. It makes it easier for the offensive line to block. It makes it less likely for pressure to appear. I think it's one of the things. And that's a function of both North Turner and Teddy Bridgewater, because Teddy feels more comfortable getting rid of the ball sooner. North Turner gives him more options to get rid of the ball sooner. I think those two things certainly play a role. I think the offensive line played better, though. I think that there were some big problems on the offensive line, but those are mostly from a run blocking perspective. I thought Mike Harris had another disappointing game. It's been a while since he's had the kind of games that I've been able to praise him for. Brandon Fusco, I thought, had a really, really disappointing game. I think from a run blocking perspective, mostly there were some issues, I think, when he was pass blocking. I think he gave up 2 or so pressures. One of them was a hit that took Teddy down, I think, on a Stephon Diggs touchdown. But Matt Khalil, for the most part, played well. I think he's the one that gave up the sack, but it was not necessarily as egregious as we've seen Matt Khalil in the past. And aside from that, he actually held up all the entire game. TJ Clemmings was pretty poor, but he was not as poor as he usually is. And so, and against Pernell McPhee too. So I think that, and another thing to note with Clemmings is that he was helped a lot less often in this game than he has been in a lot of games. And so in a lot of games, we talk about TJ Clemmings, giving up like, oh my God, he gave up like 5 or 6 pressures. Holy shit. Oh my God, he gave up 8 pressures. That's impossible. And in a lot of those games, he's getting help. And in this one, he doesn't get that much help. So I would say that that's actually an improvement for Clemmings. I thought he played better. I thought, Harris, from a pass blocking perspective, played better. I thought Berger played really well. both as a run blocker and a pass blocker. I thought Fusco, he played better than maybe some of his other games this year. There were some issues still. And I thought Matt Khalil played well. So I think the offensive line definitely held up a little bit better. So you want to attribute at least some, if not a lot, of the improvement in decreasing the amount of pressure Teddy saw in an improvement in their play. But you have to acknowledge the play calling too.
Question: Has the Pro Football Focus stuff, the numbers come out on the offensive line? Did anyone go negative?
Yeah, it looks like they only have the top performers. None of whom were on the offense. No, they had Joe Berger plus 1.9. And they had Rhett Ellison, tight end, plus 2.3, who he did actually have a really good game. I kind of wanted to bring him up because he did some really good lead blocking when he was in there. He did some really great edge blocking. He was a mauler sort of in the run game. So he was nice to see because he's been kind of disappointing after a really, really good rookie showing. At this point, he's actually been doing maybe not as well as we'd been hyping him up to be, but now he had another really, really good game. But yeah, no, we don't have the grades for all the offensive line in front of us because of the restriction in terms of what Pro Football Focus is doing now. But I would venture to say that both Clemmings and Fusco were negative, is my guess. Harris might be a negative, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to neutral. My guess is that Khalil was positive because I thought he did some good work in the run game too.
Yeah, Khalil definitely worked out. Was working out there. And though the next thing we want to bring up is we had some great receiver play out there. We had Jerick McKinnon really doing well, breaking, had a nice little touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 2 nice touchdowns. Wallace was really that was a hell of a Wallace catch. It almost made up for that weird 30-yard run to nowhere that he did that turned into an end around. I hate to bring
pretty astounding.
I hate to bring that up on a after because he had a great catch. That was a hell of a catch, but that run was just what the hell was that?
It was mind-boggling. It's really nice that the catch happened a couple of plays later or something like that. I think it was 3 or 4 plays later. But that run was so baffling. And the thing is, I didn't actually get to see it, right? Because I was traveling. And so, I was occasionally able to check Twitter, but not really. And so I didn't actually get to see, this run. And then I checked Twitter a little bit after it evidently happened, and everyone was praising Mike Wallace for this catch. And I was like, oh, so he must be playing well. And I didn't get to see the catch. And I was like, well, somebody must have vined it or gifted or something. So I searched for Wallace vines, and I only see the 0-yard run vined. And I'm like, oh my God, what?
That's what they're talking about? What the hell are they? And then the catch comes oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, that was baffling because he had some, and it wasn't just
ill-advised.
Yeah. I've seen Quentin Patton do this a couple of times for the 49ers, which is nuts that he's done it multiple times because he's a young dude who doesn't get that many snaps. And so I guess when he sees his snaps, he's willing to make as many mistakes as possible. But I've not seen veterans do that much. And he had some free yards too. It wasn't he was going to get tackled if he didn't run backwards. So yeah, that was stunning. But yeah, he got the 34-yard catch. So yeah, he did the thing that he does.
He saved him. Well, the thing he does is drop passes. What he did was save himself.
That's true. He did the thing that he was supposed to have done.
Yes, he's doing the thing that we're paying him a lot of money to do that he hasn't done a lot this year. That's what he did. Defense. We had 6 hits and 5 sacks against Cutler. He looked a little... it's weird watching Cutler this game as opposed to nearly every game he's played this year because he went right back to the I need a cigarette look on his face. He had the body language, yeah. He had the pouty, the little pouty look on his face. We got to him, and we got to him hard this game. 5 sacks and a pick, and he's thrown less picks this year than he has any other year of his career, I believe. So
I believe you're right, although not a huge bar for him.
Well, still,
No, yeah. Yeah, no, I
Dude's an
thought that. I thought,
interception. Dude's an interception machine, and the fact we were able to get one out of him, just Cutler interceptions are. I'm a camel for Cutler interceptions. Like that's what fills me up.
that was sustained.
I can go through the desert of the off season knowing that we got at least one Cutler interception. Like that'll be what keeps me going in like April when we're sitting here like trying to find things to talk about. Like, oh, remember that Cutler pick? Yeah, that was sweet. That was good. But we definitely
Yeah, well,
harassed the man.
no, I thought the Vikings did a really good job. Yeah, in terms of like defensive line play, Sharif Floyd I thought was like kind of up and down, mostly up. It's really difficult for a player of his size to play the nose tackle position, and often the Bears kind of helped out by not double teaming him. But even when he was double teamed, there were only a couple of occasions where I thought that he struggled. On one occasion, he just got moved. Which is problematic, but I think for the most part he did well, and obviously he was part of the half sack with Neil Hunter. I thought Tom Johnson played really well. I only saw one mistake in my rewatch in terms of Tom Johnson. He just kind of lost lane discipline or whatever. But he not only got that sack, but he did a lot of really good stuff, redirecting the runner, penetrating into the backfield to make sure that Forte or Langford had a really uncomfortable day out there. Contributing to I think that he contributed to another sack. I'm trying to remember because I don't know if it was Brian Robinson's strip sack, and it wasn't Chad Greenway's sack, which was also really good to see. But he did a lot of good work moving the quarterback around in the pocket. He did a lot of good work, moving running backs around, and then also I thought that despite the fact that Everson Griffin didn't show up on the stat sheet, I thought that he actually did a pretty good job in run containment. I thought obviously Brian Robinson did a good job. And then I think overall in the defense, someone else you want to point out is Eric Kendricks, who I thought had a great game. Xavier Rhodes had a phenomenal game. People probably want to bag on Terrence Newman, and I can understand why. He had some like pretty big mistakes, especially on the Alshon Jeffrey touchdown. But I think actually for the most part, he played a pretty all right game. He was actually a pretty good beast in run support. I thought that he played his assignments well because you take a look at some of the coverage stats people were tweeting out about him, and like, yeah, he gave up a lot of catches, but a lot of those catches, the scheme is supposed to have him allow those. Obviously, not the touchdown, but a lot of these are just underneath passes that he closed down on right away, prevented any yards after the catch, and prevented the first down. So I thought that he didn't play nearly as badly as a lot of people were saying. One person I do kind of want to mention real quick is Chad Greenway. I got a lot of Twitter mentions about Chad Greenway, and it was after
I wonder why. I wonder
right.
why. He's pretty okay at football at the moment.
Well,
Or
so
at least
this
I
is the
felt like I
thing,
could
though.
say that since you were up in the air.
Right. Right. Well, so right. Well, the thing is, if I had watched the game live, I might have thought that too. And it was a great sack. There was also another great moment where he put pressure on Cutler, in the game. And the thing is, this is actually probably the worst game of the year for him, even when you include that sack. Because I thought that he actually, there were two times where he just missed his alignment, like he left his alignment, and a huge run lane formed. One of them he was kind of lucky because it got called back for a penalty. It was like the very first Forte run for like 22 yards that got called back. But he lost the edge there. But there's another time where he made a defensive adjustment, and there was basically no one left in the box on 3rd and 1, which is nuts to me. It's 3rd and 1, right? And the only linebacker in the box is Eric Kendricks, and Edmund Robinson is out, covering no one in the slot. And then Chad Greenway notices a bunch formation to the right, and he adjusts people down. He creates a 4-man box with a 3-person bunch, which is standard on 3rd and long, but on 3rd and 1, you probably want someone, covering up some. So there was no one covering Langford. Gets a 7-yard run. If it wasn't for, I think it was Anthony. No, it was actually Andrew Sendejo. If it wasn't for Andrew Sendejo, that would have been a sure touchdown. Instances like that. There were instances where Chad Greenway got run out. He got moved by blockers. He got run out by running backs. And one instance I didn't really mind. It was like it was on 3rd and 25, right? Like, who gives a shit if Chad Greenway is late to react to the run when everyone expects a pass? and doesn't run it. That didn't bother me at all. But I think there were other instances where his speed didn't show up, and there's just a lot of instances where he either chose the wrong lane, misaligned the defense, or got blown up by a blocker in this game. And I probably wouldn't have noticed it if I had watched it live. But I thought that he had a really bad game. But Eric Kendricks had one of his better games of the season, because he I think he's won Rookie of the Week, Defensive Rookie of the Week once or twice, but he's had a lot of issues in coverage. But in this game, I thought that he showed up a lot, especially in run defense. So I thought he had a good game. We have a mailbag question about Anthony Harris, I think. Let's see, where is it?
Yep, we have a question about right down there.
Like how did Anthony Harris look in the second half of the game or something like that? And I was not able to look at the second half with as much detail as I was able to look at in the first half. I thought Anthony Harris did all right. I thought there were some instances where he lacked the kind of stopping power that he wanted. This is actually, I first noticed this with actually Eric Kendricks, who made a good play and then got pushed back by Langford. But this happened a couple of times to Anthony Harris, where when he gets a tackle, it's not quite Blanton-esque, right? When he becomes the cape and he gets dragged along or anything like that. It's not like that. But I would have liked some more stopping power, especially, taking on blocks. But I think, overall, I thought that he made very, very few mistakes about where he was supposed to be lined up. I know someone mentioned that on the Alshon Jeffrey touchdown, Terrence Newman looked like he was expecting more help from Anthony Harris. I'm not so sure about that. But even so, I thought that for the rest of the game, and that was in the first half. I think in the second half, I thought Harris did a really, really good job. In run support, I thought he did a really good job. In coverage, at the very end, he had this at the very end of the first half, he had this great moment where he ends up one-on-one against Alshon Jeffrey, and Cutler, throws a 50-50 ball, which, like, Alshon Jeffrey against a dude that weighs literally 40 pounds less than him, and is like 4 inches shorter, 5 inches shorter. Like, Alshon Jeffrey's probably going to win it. And Cutler did overthrow it, which helped, but Anthony Harris showed a lot of ability in asserting his space, in winning his position on the throw, and getting a hand on the ball, and nearly taking it down with him. So, like, I thought that he showed some, I don't know, moxie or whatever. Thought he showed some moments of good play. But until we get the all-22, we won't really know how well a safety actually does. But I thought that Anthony Harris had a good game. I thought Anderson Day had a very up and down game. I thought there were some really good moments from him. That there were some really, really bad moments from him. But overall, I thought the defense played well, and I think that a lot of that has to do with how well the defensive line did, how well Xavier Rhodes did, and how well Eric Kendricks did.
So let's go on to the next question on here, which is about Justin Tratow, who apparently just makes interceptions happen. Like, he was in there a couple weeks ago. He gets his pick, and then gets one against Cutler. Like, that's just a strange coincidence, right? Like, he's not just somebody who should just be going to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I think that in terms of, like, turnovers per snap or something like that, he has to be, like, leading the league or something, because it's kind of nuts what he's been able to do.
All he does is get picks. Like, that's all he does. It's like Zach Line before he started, like, dropping off for the year. All Zach Line did was get touchdowns. All Tratow before he, starts dropping off and only gets 20-yard runs or something like that. No. Tratow, dude's legit.
That was really good, and I'm glad the Vikings were able to re-sign him. Unfortunately, it comes on the heel of Scott Crichton going on IR or whatever. But I thought Justin Tratow, he's a good player. And he's been really, really good depth for the Vikings for a while. And I'm glad he's back because he's, really great depth.
In your opinion, who made this game unwinnable for the Bears? Was it somebody on the defense? Was it an offensive player? It certainly wasn't their special teams, which were just eating us up alive for a little bit there. Who's the culprit who made this game unwinnable for the Bears?
That's actually a really good question. Jay Cutler may have had the worst day, but I don't think any individual player made it unwinnable. Two of the members of the offensive line actually played really, really well for them. I thought that the right side of the line despite how well, Robinson ended up playing over the course of the game, I thought the right side of the line for the Bears actually held up really well, especially against some of the complex, I shouldn't say complex, especially against some of the looks that the Vikings gave them, tackle end stunts and stuff like that. But, I think that, Hronis Grasu, made the day really, really difficult for them, especially when, you go up against Sharif Floyd, a really, really good defensive tackle, but when he's playing kind of out of position at the nose, you expect a center to do a little bit better than Grasu did. I think that they've had some issues at left tackle. I think they had some issues at left guard, even though left guard is probably their best position. So, I think that was an issue, the left side of the line in terms of that, their ability to prevent pressure and get some movement in the run game. I thought Cutler's play was an issue, but I thought, overall, maybe Alshon Jeffrey didn't, perform his like savior type function. I don't know if there was one player on the Bears, that made the game unwinnable. But I think that if there would be a player, it would be on offense, because I think on defense is just kind of overall mediocrity. Plus, I thought the Vikings played really well on offense, so kind of difficult to single out a player on the Bears defense.
It was a good performance overall. It was nice to see. And if you watched the mic'd up for Terrence Newman, he had a good thing at the end, which was we need to stop playing these close games. It's nice.
It's a really good mic'd up. I think James, you mentioned that like in our group chat that maybe this goes in our top 10. I wouldn't say that it goes into our top 10, although again, mythical list. We haven't actually made a top 10 yet. We probably never will.
It's like one of those. It's like one of those Mount Rushmore conversations. People are like, oh, I don't know if I'd put them in my top 4 or whatever, but no one ever like really writes them down. But I thought it was a pretty good one, and
but it is a really good one, and it gets better over time too, which is nice. Like near the end.
I like the waxing Eric Sugarman's head.
That was so good.
And getting Brian Robinson to do a little dance as he was stretching out his hamstrings, and what was the other one? Asking the refs.
One of the refs looks like Al Roker. Like he like walks up to the 3 refs and he's like, "I got a question for you two. Does he resemble?" And he looks at the third ref. Does he resemble Al Roker just a little bit? And like one of the refs like is caught off guard. He's like, "What?" And the other one's like, "Yes, absolutely."
Like, like he must be new around here, right? Like, not used to players coming up and joking a little bit. Like,
that was so good.
So good win, good game, and we control our playoff destiny. If we win out, we will take the division. We have 2 more games to play for that. However, we have this one win, and we get to talk about Sunday Night Football. We get flexed to Sunday night against the Giants. And all anyone wants to talk about on Twitter, on ESPN, on Fox Sports, on Talk Radio, the only thing people want to talk about is how big of a piece of crap Odell Beckham is. And how glad they are that he was suspended for 1 game for a multitude of reasons, but probably the biggest one being that shot to the head that he did a run around on a block and just leapt with his helmet toward the defender.
Yeah, it was a stunning display. I think the entire game from Odell Beckham, and obviously not in a good way. I mean, he punched Josh Norman, I think, in the first quarter, and he'd be kind of an asshole the entire game, and it culminates obviously in this. I think it was in the third quarter, but he launches himself at Josh Norman's head, and it's the kind of thing that you could see ending a player's career, And I mean, it was kind of like disgusting to watch.
On the week that the movie Concussion comes out, like,
right,
really,
right.
Like they might as well have had that, like the next commercial or the next commercial break after that play aired, as people are like trying to contain themselves or get themselves ready for the next down. It's like, all right, we're gonna throw out a commercial. Tell the truth, as Will Smith, yells in a language that is barely his own. Like his accent's so terrible. Listening in the previews for that, but just, tell the truth. Like, jeez, all right. Yeah, that's and now back to football, which is providing you with wonderful moments like this. And Odell Beckham just leaps at him with his helmet.
Yeah, there are like some strange rumors going around about this too. So like one of the things that has been reported, of course, is that the Carolina Panthers defensive backs have like bats on the field. or not really bats on the field, but like their pregame warm up, they have some baseball bats, which
They're
Reggie
bringing the
Bush did.
lumber. They're bringing the
Yeah,
lumber, according
well,
to
it's
one
because
insider.
it's because they want to have home run plays. But Reggie Bush did this in the like I think it was like 2009 or 2006 for the Saints or something. I don't know. Viking Lifer pointed this out on Twitter, and then a couple of other people did too. But I mean, this has happened before. But it's like also not like a reason to go nuts. It's also kind of weird because the defensive backs have been doing this for a while for Carolina. But another rumor, and this is actually getting a lot of play. Sort of, Stephen A. Smith commented but didn't comment on it. Deion Sanders commented but didn't comment on it. And normally I wouldn't like to say anything, but like it's become such a big part of the conversation. So evidently, and this I kind of heard this, as everyone else was kind of hearing about this, there might be a rumor that Odell Beckham is gay, but the bigger issue is that Josh Norman was either calling him gay and Odell Beckham reacted really, really badly to that, or was using anti-gay slurs and Odell Beckham reacted, really, really badly to that. And a lot of the conversations that some of the defensive backs were having before the game with the media involved like mentions of Odell Beckham's like femininity or whatever, right? Which normally is just like masculine trash talk. But in
Dude
the
has
context
pretty hair. Dude has pretty hair.
Well, they did mention that, but they also called him like a ballerina or whatever. And normally, without this context,
Really?
you're just like, well, yeah. And without the context of like potentially that this is the rumor, normally you just be like, oh, they're just questioning his toughness or whatever. But with this context, you're just like, oh my god, is that really the case? Are they really calling him out for being gay? Is that something that they're doing? Like that's like not okay. Obviously, none of this like legitimizes Odell Beckham's behavior, right? But it does cast it like in a different light, and you're like kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird. And who knows, right? What's happening? But crazy. Josh Norman was mic'd up for the game, so the NFL should have evidence one way or the other about.
Can that please air as soon as possible?
Just right, like that needs to happen like yesterday.
Especially if there's a bunch of homophobic remarks, and just like, oh well, we need to distract something from the concussion movie, so here
so let's
one
make
of our
in an even more awful light.
Yeah, be like, we have this concussion thing down, but we don't have down is homophobia. It's like the Rondo thing all over again, except on the NFL where people actually care what is said to the referees apparently, where they can't use the N-word or anything because that'll get a penalty. But you can say anything you want against homosexuals, and that'll be their big like distraction. Like, oh, the NFL needs to do something about homophobia in this league, and Stephen A. Smith and everybody on First Take are going to have hot takes about the homophobia level in this game, and how we need to be bringing back players like Michael Sam who can prove that gay people can play and bring tolerance to the land. And nobody ends up watching the concussion movie because we're too busy talking about the gay people in the NFL.
So the NFL wins? I suppose the NFL may win in that situation.
The NFL wins through homophobia. That's where we're at with this.
That's nice and twisted.
That's
well, okay. So all that aside, what it does mean is that Odell Beckham has been suspended for a game. Based on the recordings, maybe we'll hear about whether or not Josh Norman received like a heavy fine or suspension or whatever. But for the Vikings, this means that the Giants' biggest weapon by like leaps and miles and bounds is gone. Which is a big boon for the Vikings, who, if they win this game, I think it's guaranteed that the game against Green Bay is going to be for the division. If they don't win the game and Green Bay loses to Arizona, which feels likely, it's still going to be a thing for the division. But also, if they win this game, they clinch. Although they could clinch it before the game starts. It's kind of like these late playoff scenarios. You're just like, well, you want to win the game, obviously, but if they don't, well, here's like these 8 avenues for why it won't matter. But I think that it's kind of a crucial game, even if other external factors can diminish the importance of it. Because no matter what happens, if the Vikings win, they improve their station either by clinching or by putting themselves in a position to be absolutely, in in the driver's seat for the NFC North. So like, yeah, no, there's a lot of reasons that the Vikings would view this as a critical game. And if you don't like, I don't think that you kind of want to break down all these different scenarios because, yeah, the Vikings could just win and then they're in. So it's a big game, and then the Giants' biggest asset is gone. And I don't think that they have the ability to like really replace him. So Dale Beckham, you don't really have the ability to replace him.
Yeah, I was going to say, who takes his place as the number one receiver in that receiving core?
Well, with Victor Cruz on IR, you just really don't have much talent. So there's Dwayne Harris, who's not really a receiver, right? He's more of a returner than a receiver. You've got Ruben Randall, who has been kind of like the fantasy pariah because he kept on almost breaking out. He's like 6'4", 205. He's got kind of this profile of a guy who's going to break out. And there's a lot of games where he gets a lot of targets, but he's only cracked 100 yards once this year. He has six touchdowns for the year. He's got like 638 yards. He's not a terrible receiver, but he's definitely like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and he may end up being the top receiver for the game because the other two are either suspended or on IR. And then you've got Hakeem Nicks, who, that would be scary, like in 2011. And then you've got Miles White, who I believe the Packers cut first. I think this San Francisco may have signed him in a drafted free agency or something, and then the Packers cut him. Either way, the Packers cut him despite the fact that they don't have any receivers. So that's like their next guy. And then they've got
he wasn't good enough to play for the ragtag group of receivers for the Packers.
Exactly. And then they've got this guy from Connecticut. So they don't really have any receivers. They've got Ruben Randall, who, fantasy people want to be relevant and have wanted to be relevant for the past couple of years. You've got Dwayne Harris, who's a really good returner who fumbles the ball a lot. And then you've got bad Hakeem Nicks, and you've got Miles White. So they can't really replace him. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants, tried to, overemphasize maybe, their tight ends who are not that great, right? Because Will Tye, who's had kind of a resurgence this year, I shouldn't say resurgence, but he's kind of had a late season surge. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I think he's an undrafted rookie this year. But yeah, he's been good, but he's not great, and that might be who they have to go to.
Yeah, I was just looking at the depth chart real quick, and boy, this is not great. Cunningham's their backup tight end, who hasn't done terribly this year, but it's Tye and Cunningham that you would expect to get a little more play. Boy, after Beckham Jr., it's Harris and Hakeem Nicks. That might have been a good 1-2 combo. How many years ago?
Right.
Yeah, it's not great. Not the position you want to find yourself in. So what's going to happen with their running back Jennings? Is he just going to get swallowed up by our defense?
I think so. I think Mike Zimmer said that he expects all three players to be healthy for this game. All three players that have been missing. So Harrison Smith, Anthony Barr, Linval Joseph, who you might recognize as the three best run defenders on the team. There's no other words for it except it's going to be tough for the Giants. It's going to be extremely tough. I don't see Rashad Jennings, breaking 4 yards a carry in this game. I would be surprised if he got a rushing touchdown, in part because I would be surprised if their team got close enough to the end zone to pound the rock with a rushing touchdown because of the way their passing game is running. But also, Rashad Jennings has had some good games, but mostly some bad games. And I don't think the offensive line is good enough, and I don't think that Rashad Jennings is good enough that he's going to be able to crack 100 yards or get a touchdown. He only has 2 touchdowns for the year anyway, so or 2 rushing touchdowns. So yeah, it's
not looking good.
I'm not super worried about him. Maybe I shouldn't be this confident. It's a primetime game. It's the New York Giants. It's Eli Manning who pulls out these insane games out of his ass out of nowhere. But I guess I don't see story. Like I don't see how it plays out in a world where the Giants win.
It is a strange situation to be in that we can be this confident against a team that is just known for just messing things up and playing well at times that you think they're going to play poorly. And if you believe in karma, I imagine that you're thinking, okay, well, they didn't end up benching Beckham, so this is going to end up biting the Giants, and we're going to end up just dominating them. I do think that if the team that showed up against Arizona and the team that showed up against the Bears, if they show up against the Giants won't be able to hang in past the third quarter. Like Eli plays that weird game where he'll throw a nasty pick or something, but he'll have a couple of really nice shots that just are only the place where his receiver can catch it. Like it's hard to play against him, but he tends to play down or up to his competition. And I don't know if what that necessarily means for the Vikings, but I don't feel like he's going to be able to have enough.
Yeah, so if you look through how the Giants, I mean, the Giants overall have done that. They've played up or down to their competition. So here's what's interesting. So they lost by only 1 point to the New England Patriots back when the Patriots, I think, were fully healthy. They only lost by 3 points to the Carolina Panthers. And I would say this Jets team is good. They lost in overtime to this Jets team. And so, they had a 49-52 game against the New Orleans Saints, right? They lost by 1 point to the good version of the Dallas Cowboys at the very beginning of the season. With Tony Romo and the kind of team that could probably,
A
win the division.
rare Tony Romo appearance. A rare
Yeah,
one.
right. Maybe an 11-5, 12-4 version of the Dallas team. So, they've had some really good performances. They also got blown up by the Eagles, 7-27. They lost to Washington 14-20. They've had, some bad games too, right? They only beat the 49ers by 3. And they've had some bad games. I mean, they lost to the Atlanta Falcons. And so, they definitely play up or down to their competition. They've had a ton of really, really close games this year, kind of irrespective of who their, how strong their opponents are. So you kind of always have to think like, hey, this is something here that, maybe there's a trap. But I can't write the script for what the offense is going to do, especially against a fully healthy Vikings defense. So, there's going to be a lot of problems for them.
It would be interesting to watch this be the Eli Manning meltdown game, because we're fairly convinced that this is just not a good team this year for the Giants. This is middle of the road at best, just not a good team, and it'd be nice if we could have a game to kind of justify that. Like, oh, yep, 4 picks for Eli in the first half. All right, we're good. We know what we found, and we'll just move on, and Harrison Smith can have 2 pick sixes and be done. Like, okay. We can rest our starters for Green Bay. Like it'd be nice if we can find a situation where we end up taking out the Giants early. And I sound like overly confident, but I just don't feel like we have much to fear with this Giants team. Like who's on their defense besides the club wielding, the club wielding Jason Pierre-Paul.
Well, one second, right before we get to the defense, I do want to point this out about Eli Manning. This is the lowest interception rate of his career, and the most recent interception that we saw him throw, the wide receiver fell down on. So there's something maybe about Eli that's a little bit different, but you're right. So the defense
didn't we just do that to Cutler and having like a career year for not picking him off? Let's send Tratow out there. Just send him out. Just one snap. All he does is get picks.
So the defense has Club Pierre-Paul, like you mentioned.
Well, people were making a big deal about that pass bat he had. Like, it didn't hit the real club part.
He's also had a bad year too, so it's like whatever.
Well,
right?
he's had a bad year for many reasons. I'm sure if he had all the fingers on his hand, he could count to how many bad reasons why he's had a bad year. But dude, that pass, it hit his club. It hit his wrist. Come on, it's not like his wrist went 4 sizes bigger with that club on his hand. Do they know if he's going to wear that his entire career, by the way, or if it's just going to be for this season?
That's actually a really good question. I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was just for this season. And then he would wear like something maybe different, like a weird glove that's less protective, but like no less weird for like the rest of his career. But who knows? Um, other than Pierre Paul, I guess Robert Ayers has been doing all right for them. As a defensive end, he kicks inside in the nickel as a defensive tackle. That's kind of it. I mean, like there's some recognizable names, right? I mean, there's like Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, and he's been sort of all right for them this year. They've got Prince Amukamara, who was better last year than this year. He's been kind of struggling this year. In nickel, they've got Trevin Wade, I think, at cornerback, who's kind of a nobody. Landon Collins, who I think he's had one or two good plays this season that people like, kind of remember and that stick out, but he's actually had a pretty bad year. In base defense, they have Jasper Brinkley, who I think we remember. But here's the thing. Jasper Brinkley is playing about as well as he ever did, for the Vikings, but for the Giants. But you think about that, and then you also think he's also the best linebacker that they have so far this year. They've got a really bad set of linebackers. They've got, Uwaniunga, who has a cool name and he's had some cool plays, but whatever. They've got Jonathan Casillas, who's been pretty bad this year. And they also have they've got JT Thomas, they've got Devin Kennard. They all see snaps based on whether or not they're sort of in their base defense, their nickel defense, and they've all been pretty bad this year. Landon Collins is bad, and the free safety, Craig Dahl, who's been with 49ers and the Rams and whatever, he can't seem to stick to a team for a reason. He's been bad this year too, and a lot of what he's been bad at this year involves pass defense and stuff like that. I think that he's actually, even though he's a free safety, he's actually much better at run defense than he is at pass defense. And he's been having just a bad year. So yeah, they don't really have him. He's playing well. Landon Collins is playing well against the run, which is kind of the only thing he can do. But aside from Robert, even Colin Jenkins, who's a player that I think is really good overall, he's been having like a terrible year. So like, whatever. They're all bad. Everyone's bad.
That's our Giants preview, everyone. The defense. Everyone's just not good. This is the team that let how many points get scored on it against the Giants, and then let up about as much the next week too. Against the Saints. And then
they allowed 52 points from the Saints, right? And then you're like, well, that's kind of a fluke game, right? And then the next week they go up against who is it, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and actually they did the opposite. They actually crushed them. They only allowed 18 points, and so it's just kind of weird. They've allowed 52 to the Saints, 38 to the Panthers, who, obviously they're good. They're not really known for their offense. They have a sneaky good offense. I think they're a lot better than a lot of people say. But 38 points to the Panthers. 27 points to the good Cowboys, 27 points to the bad 49ers, 27 points to the Eagles. Like it's all over the map. But for the most part, it's a bad team on defense.
So I guess the question I have to ask is, do we believe that the key members of our defense are going to be allowed to play this game? The ones that were injured for the last one, or should we wait for Green Bay?
No, I would rather play them. Like, who knows if they were actually just sitting out this game and resting in order to stay healthy enough to be able to play in a clinching game or whatever, right? Like, who knows how healthy they are, but I think that if they're ready to play, they're ready to play, and you should just assume that they're healthy, because there's no point sitting out absolutely actually healthy players when you're not guaranteed a lock in the playoffs. So yeah, I think that all three should be allowed to play if they're healthy. I think that you also want them to have some games to get back into rhythm too, right, for the playoffs. You don't want just the one game. So there's a couple of reasons. Also, I like playing to win, so that's part of it.
You play to win the game. Damn it, you play to win the game.
And Herm Edwards, he's always right, except most of the time.
Damn lie. That is a damn dirty lie, and we will not have that on this show. We save those for the mailbag.
And then one other thing, what if the Vikings really do have a primetime bug? What if it's not just like something that is a result of having a bad team for a couple of years and then some chance and then playing some good teams or whatever? What if they actually are just bad in primetime? If so, the best way to shake that bug, probably have your best players play.
That is an interesting idea. If we want to win in primetime, we should have our best players on the field. That's Why don't you have a GM position somewhere? Like why haven't the Browns hired you instead of the dartboard they have every year for drafting? Like I feel like you could go far, kid. Feel like you could go far. So a Vikings offense. Can we expect Teddy to keep it rolling? I think this is a good test because it's not a great defense, but it's one of those if Teddy has made the turn, and if we've made the turn as far as play calling goes, this is the defense to do it against.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that this is, I mentioned this, after the Cardinals game, that this might be, some of the evolution of Norv Turner again adapting to the personnel that he has at wide receiver, at offensive line, and at quarterback. That I think we're just going to see better rhythm, a shorter passing game, and so on. So yeah, no, I think that we're more than likely going to see, more of a good Teddy, especially because again, I just don't trust this Giants defense. I think, and I should say, as much time as I spent bashing the linebackers, I mean, the cornerbacks aren't bad; they're just not great. Yeah, I don't see any reason that Teddy shouldn't continue to play well. Maybe he won't have a perfect passer rating, but I think that he'll show up. I think that he's probably going to throw maybe like 8 or so yards per attempt. That's really generous, by the way, 8 yards per attempt. But yeah, I could see him throwing for about 8 yards per attempt, and I could see him throwing, for a touchdown or two, and for the most part, avoiding interception-worthy throws.
Who do you think is going to step up from the receiving core this game? Wallace has been turning it on a bit lately, and Diggs certainly returned to mid-season form here. Do you think anyone in particular is going to make a nice little breakout?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we kind of have to be careful of some of these late season breakouts. I mean, because Charles Johnson was one of them, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, you know, um, a little more of Adam Thielen. He keeps on showing up for like maybe 1 or 2 plays a game,
He
but
had a great little catch on that. I think it was an offside or onside kick that Thielen just jumped on and then immediately had a play the next series.
yeah, it was nice to see. No, but for sure, I expect to see. I mean, for the most part, I expect to see some more Stephon Diggs. Teddy does a good job, obviously, of spreading the ball around. Zach Line, Adrian Peterson, Jerick McKinnon. I think Asiata, could be in the mix. Wallace is obviously going to be in the mix. Stephon Diggs. Maybe we'll see Adam Thielen with another target. Also, Kyle Rudolph, Red Ellison. Like there's so many people that he likes to throw the ball to, so it's like difficult to isolate. But I think Stephon Diggs is the most talented pass catcher on the team, and maybe we're not going to see him destroy a team for 100 yards. Although the Giants team is potentially one of the ones to do it, but I certainly see maybe 50 or more yards from him in this game. So that's the person that I would tab as the kind of guy to watch for.
You know why he's going to get 150 yards? It's because he got knocked out of out of the fantasy playoffs this week, and he was on my bench. And so, as a result of me not being, I'm knocked out now. I can't benefit from. I can't benefit from him. He is going to have like 3 touchdowns. He is going to have 150 to 200 yards, and is just going to be like consider like rookie of the year talk is going to happen as a result of this game because I can't benefit from him being on my fantasy team. That's what's going to happen.
That's just going to happen.
I
Screw you.
the 2 leagues that I made it to the finals in, I get knocked out because of Drew frickin' Brees throwing touchdowns to Cooks, and yeah, I realize nobody cares about any other people's fantasy leagues and everything, but seriously, Drew Brees, go to hell. Just not you and Cooks and everybody else on that godforsaken team who didn't play for the Vikings recently can all go straight into the ocean. I'm
I don't
gonna
think you'll find many listeners to the podcast who disagree.
exactly.
Even if
I'm gonna go outside with my little aerosol can and see if I can help increase global warming to get rid of New Orleans. Just God, I cannot stand Drew Brees. Be so happy when he is retired and I no longer have to look at that mark on his face. Like that just, ugh, cannot
Oh
stand that
man, going
human
out
being.
his birthmark.
Yeah,
Man, you must really
I'm
hate
going
it.
at the birthmark. I'm going out hard. That's where I'm at. All right, so we have a little bit of a mailbag to get through. We have some excellent questions, and the rule around here has always been that if you answer the question of what the Morse code intro is, that you get the first mailbag question. It's been like that since we started the show, so we're gonna keep this going. So Matt, the guy who figured out the Morse code thing, asks, "Can you please explain the different number techniques, 3 technique, 1 technique, and how they are used by different position players? Why do some players excel at one and are challenged by other positions or styles?"
Yeah, sure. So there's actually a whole, list basically of numbers that run from 0 to 9. And for the most part, it means going from inward out. So the 0 technique is head up over the center. The 1 technique is between the center and the guard. The 2 technique is head up over the guard. The 3 technique is between the guard and the tackle. And this is where it gets kind of confusing because people refer to them in different ways. But the way I would like to think of it, and would be like a little bit more consistent, is that the 4 technique is head up over the tackle. The 5 technique is on the outside shoulder of the tackle. Depending on who you talk to, the 5 technique is head up over the tackle. Whatever. And then the 6 technique is head up over the tight end, although sometimes it's just you're a little bit further out of the tackle. And then the 7 technique is very wide of the tight end. Then there's not really an 8 technique, but there's something called a wide 9 that puts you really far wide of the tackle. And this is something that we kind of, remember from the Jim Schwartz days in Detroit, that we remember from, some of the like I think it's Washburn days in Tennessee and Philadelphia. You want really, really fast defensive ends for sort of the wide 9 technique. But getting back to the defensive tackle positions that the Vikings have, the 1 technique and the 3 technique. The 1 technique is what we often call the nose tackle in the 4-3 defense. And so that person, their job is they'll very often get double teams. And it's not necessarily because they're the best player on the defensive line, but because the numbers align in such a way that it's only possible to get a double team on this guy and not really many other people. Because when they line up in the 4-3, you usually have a guy outside of a tackle, and then next to that guy you're going to have so that's your defensive end. So that's like Everson Griffin, right? And then next to Everson Griffin, you're probably going to have someone like Sharif Floyd who plays 3 technique, between the tackle and the guard. Well, it's not, you can't really, unless you've got a tight end out there, you can't really put a double team with your tackle and your guard on Sharif Floyd on the 3 technique. You have to have your guard take him one-on-one so your tackle can take on the defensive end. That means that the center, who has, Linval Joseph or a 1 technique on the other side of him next to the other guard, has the ability to double team him. And then all the way on the other side of the other tackle, you've got that other defensive end like Ryan Robinson. So, what that means is that person is going to have to take on double teams a lot. They're going to have to be a bigger guy. They need to be stout. They can't be moved, from the pocket. If they get moved, then, the running back can run up the middle. And so they need to have the kind of strength and leverage to be able to take on 2, very powerful offensive linemen. They're also the quickest way to the quarterback. So if they're very good at penetrating and getting upfield, then their pressure is the most valuable pressure, but they're just not as likely to do it. The 3 technique, they're usually the primary pass rushers among the 2 defensive tackles. And so their job is to get to the quarterback. And sometimes, depending on the defense, the linebackers will fill in terms of their run responsibility. So sometimes 3 techniques don't have to care about the run at all. Sometimes they do. But their job is to shoot upfield and try to get pressure on the quarterback as quickly as possible. So they don't need to be as strong. They need to be quick. That's usually what the prototype is. So the 3 techniques are quicker. The 1 techniques are stronger. Obviously, sometimes you'll have players who are kind of both, but 1 techniques also need to be kind of massive, which is why I was talking about for the past couple of weeks, why it may be difficult for Sharif Floyd, who's kind of small even for a 3 technique at around 295 pounds, to play at the 1 technique position where Linval Joseph plays. Linval Joseph is 330 pounds. Huge difference. So that's kind of a lot of the fundamental differences, is that the 1 technique doesn't penetrate as much, and he's designed to sort of hold position and make sure no running lanes open up, whereas the 3 technique, their job is to be quicker and faster and get to the quarterback.
So it really is just a situation of just knowing your role and trying to execute it, and it's just not as easy to do for certain players.
Yeah, no, for sure. Certain players have physical limitations or stylistic limitations that prevent them from doing one or the other. And none of this, all of this assumes that you're playing sort of the one gap style. There's a two gap style of defense that involves, a different set of skills and stuff like that. So that's why sometimes, people talk about switching from the 4-3 to the 3-4. You have to change what you're doing on the defensive line because sometimes you'll switch from one gap techniques to two gap techniques, which means instead of playing three technique or one technique, you'll play a 0 or 2 or 4 technique. It gets complicated over time.
Yeah. Brendan White asks, do we trade AP in the offseason for a second round pick and finally let Teddy take the reins?
This is something that I think Andy Carlson has been banging the table for. I wanted to trade AP before this offseason. And who knows? Maybe
I wanted to trade AP before he had a 1,000-yard season this year. Darn it! Get off my lawn, kids.
And who knows? Maybe I was wrong about that, but I certainly still want to because I think that he's playing well. But I mean, there's no question that he's old, and running backs can just fall off cliffs. I mean, take a look at Marshawn Lynch, also every other running back. I think that we're closer to it than we are further away from it, and that I think that you need to sell at a point where he still has value. I think that Jerick McKinnon is really good. I think that Matt Asiata is definitely underrated. And I think that you can find a power back in the draft and have a good combination of running backs, kind of like your own Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard sort of situation. And I think that if you can get a second round pick from, I don't know if you can. I thought at the beginning of the season you'd be able to get a second and a fourth, but now that a year's passed, he's got more wear and tear on his body and stuff like that. Who knows if you can do that? But yeah, I would say that you if you could get a second round pick for him in this offseason, you should.
Next question is also from Brendan White, who says, do we look to give Teddy a big receiver like Thomas or Doxson at the tail end of round one? Loves him some Doc.
Yeah, I love Josh Doxson. He's maybe the best jump ball receiver in the draft. He's not a bad route runner. I mean, he's not as good as Laquan Treadwell or anything like that, but yeah, he provides exactly what the Vikings offense kind of lacks. And if they got a receiver in the first round, I wouldn't mind, even though people are talking about the offensive line, people are talking about safeties and stuff like that, and linebackers, and I get all that. But you give Teddy a weapon, and I think it's good to have weapons. I would not mind that at all, for sure. Mike Thomas, I like, but I don't like as much.
Next question is from Kobe Top 6, who asks, can Anthony Barr really be considered amongst the elite linebackers when he is injured so often?
So I'm always skeptical of the idea that players are necessarily injury prone. Obviously, there are some players who are injury prone. Percy Harvin and Bob Sanders, I think, are really, really good examples. But I mean, Anthony Barr played 12 games last year, and he's played at least 12. He's probably going to play more games this year. And so that's not super injury prone to me, actually. That's, obviously if you play 12 games every year of your career, you kind of a liability, but not a huge liability. And if he plays at, elite level for 12 games a year, I mean, a team is going to pay for that. And I think that he's not necessarily going to be consistently injury prone. I've mentioned this on the podcast before. A lot of players that we think are injury prone end up not being injury prone. Like Adrian Peterson, before the draft was considered injury prone. A lot of quarterbacks, Drew Brees, Matt Stafford, were considered injury prone. And now
Drew Brees should probably be more injury prone.
If you had your way, maybe that would be the case. A lot of players that we thought were injury prone because they had a couple injuries early in their career or in college, did not end up repeating those injuries and ended up staying on the field for a long time. So, yeah, I think so, especially because he's probably going to play, 14 games, when all is said and done by the end of the season. So, missed 2 games this year, 4 games last year. I'm not that concerned.
Not yet, anyway. Let's look at next question from Isaac Huntley, who says, was it satisfying that 2 of our biggest plays went right at Tracy Porter? F that guy.
Yes, it was absolutely satisfying. Screw that guy forever. Also, Teddy blew him up on I think Mike Wallace's stupid run. So yeah, that was nice. Teddy got in on a block.
It was nice.
Tracy Porter.
Also from Isaac Huntley asks, objectively speaking, how legitimate of a candidate is Zimmer for Coach of the Year? He's been a wizard with a depleted D. Now, he might be a decent candidate in a year we didn't have so many, 10-0, 13-0 teams, but Bruce Arians has to be like at the top of everyone's list, right?
Yeah, for sure. Bruce Arians and like Ron Rivera. I don't know if you have an undefeated team, like they have to be in the conversation, right? So yeah, and I think that Zimmer is like, uh, I suppose objectively speaking, whatever, he's put together a really, really good coaching performance, and maybe it's one of the top 5 coaching performances of the year. But he's also just not a real candidate given sort of the research. Like maybe I shouldn't even say resurgence, but just how well the Cardinals play, and how well the Panthers are playing, and normally I'd say Bill Belichick deserves to be in this conversation every year. This year, it just doesn't feel like it as much, even though the Patriots are probably the best AFC team, just because they kind of dropped off, of course, due to injury, which is not something that slowed Mike Zimmer down, but still.
I feel like if you lose to the Eagles, this year you immediately get out of the running for like best coaching of the year, best like MVP of the year goes away too. Like Brady shouldn't be in the conversation as a result of that game. Like he doesn't have receivers, okay, fine, but like no, he's gone. That he is not coach of the year. They lost to the flippin' Eagles.
And then two things that I would mention, maybe Marvin Lewis of the Bengals. I mean, they're an 11-3 team, and they've got A.J. McCarron at quarterback right now. He's won the last 2 games, I think. And then
he's just won the. Oh yeah, he's won both technically, but he started this week for the first time and broke the streak of Alabama quarterbacks in the NFL losing. That's a hell of a stat.
What was 1987?
Yeah, 1987 is the last time an Alabama quarterback took a team to a win starting in the NFL. Like, that's amazing. How is that even remotely a thing?
So Marvin Lewis deserves to be in the conversation. And then one, I think probably not, but if we wanted to go dark horse and we didn't want to pick Mike Zimmer, Todd Bowles with the New York Jets. I mean, their quarterback gets punched out, right? They have to go with their backup quarterback, and they've actually got a pretty good team. I mean, they're 9-5 in a really tough division.
So the next question is from Richard Snowdon, who says, if you could trade one starter from the Vikes to the Bears, who would it be, if any, and why? Position for position.
You'd have to. Dusty already answered this in Twitter actually, and it was just like, yeah, obviously Mike Wallace for Alshon Jeffrey, done.
No, screw that. Let's go with Patterson for Alshon Jeffrey. Can we do that instead? Can we get a little more value?
You have to get a starter at the same position.
Whatever. I like my way of breaking the rules. Yeah. Wallace.
I would also trade a 5th-string receiver for one of the top at the position.
Yeah.
Of course, James.
You do that every time. Why don't I have a GM position either? Like, any chance you get to trade a first... that's enough of that. Question from John G. Height, who asks, how does yesterday's game impact the study Arif did on the quote-unquote numbers of Teddy? That's a good one. Yeah. That's referring to a great article you put out on the Norseman a few weeks ago. So how does this affect the study?
So I didn't actually run the numbers again, but I mean obviously positively. Unfortunately, despite a really, really high touchdown rate in the game, his overall touchdown rate is not going to be high enough for you to include that in the bonus. But of course, he does move up in the ranks of yards per attempt, which is sort of the key stat or the key indicator. He had a positive Pro Football Focus score. That's a really good stat in terms of projecting performance a couple of years out. His DVOA in the game from Football Outsiders was really good. So all of those things impacted positively. Teddy Bridgewater right now ranks 15th in the NFL in yards per attempt, which is like, given all the complaints people have had about him this year, like ranks 15th. Like he's right next to Phillip Rivers. So yeah, no, I think he's playing well, and I think that this improves his numbers, but not much that I think that it significantly changes the conclusion, right? That statistically, and obviously Derek Carr had a bad game, And he ranks only 21st overall in yards per attempt. But, I don't think that this changes statistically the conclusion that Derek Carr is probably the most advanced or the best bet as a developmental prospect, followed by Teddy Bridgewater, followed by Blake Bortles, if you just go by the numbers that help predict, future wins. But yeah, no, I think it's a good move in his direction.
Next question is by Chance on Twitter, who asks, do you think we still need to target a safety in next year's draft or free agency, or do you think the Exum and Harris combo will do?
Actually, I think that's a really good question. I think that, Harris has been playing pretty well. Obviously, if we have a larger sample, that would be nice. It depends on whether or not, Harris would have the opportunity to play instead of Sendejo once Smith is healthy. If not, I'll take a look at the all-22 and take, a deeper look. I won't really have an answer, but I do think that this can help the Vikings not need to take a safety in the first round or two. But they should seriously consider giving Harris and Exum competition in the mid rounds. So, a conditional yes, because most people when they say take an X or Y in the draft, they usually mean the first 3 rounds. So, sort of yes, but I would have to take a second look.
Matt Nelson asks, does Jason Pierre-Paul get phantom itching sensations on his missing finger? Yeah, that has to be a yes, right? Like,
I mean, I would think I can't speak for him or anything like that, but I mean, almost guaranteed.
You haven't spoken to his people and asked that specific question?
Right. It was weird, right? But yeah, he has to, right?
Like, there's no way. You don't have a firework go off in your hand and lose a finger or two and not have that I want to say like that Civil War feeling. Like you lost a limb and you're sitting there talking to people. Yep, lost the arm, still feel it. Like, not sure where Civil War came from, but I'm not removing it from the show. Darn it, that's a thing, and yeah, I'm gonna move on. This because Matt Nelson has another question that might actually depress us. Which defense is worse, the 2015 Giants or the 2013 Vikings?
Woo. So the 2015 Giants have had their moments. I mentioned it a couple of questions ago, but like, I don't know if the 2013 Vikings ever had their. I mean, they allowed the most points in the NFL that year. I don't know if they ever had their moments. I mean, the lowest they held their opponents to was nice, but it was the Detroit Lions. It was 13. Then it's like 20, 23, 26, 27, 27, 29, 30, 31, 31, 34, 35, 41, 42, 44. That's a lot of friggin' points. The 2015 Giants had multiple games below 20. So, sucks to be the 2013 Vikings, I guess. I know I think that qualitatively the 2013 Vikings, player for player, were probably better. But like the results on the field, I think, indicate the opposite.
Looking at it statistically, it's probably clear that the Vikings were the worst team between the two.
Yeah, but it's just like player for player, like on the defense.
If we throw 2 guys down there with one leg and tell them it's an ass-kicking contest, we'll see who ends up surviving. But I feel like nobody really wins in this conversation.
Yeah, no one really wins the conversation. No. I'm just saying I would take, a defense that has like Brian Robinson and Harrison Smith, and yes, Josh Robinson, and even bad Jared Allen, over the team. They also had Trey Floyd. They had rookie Trey Floyd over like the team that the Giants ostensibly have at defense.
Last question of the show comes to us from Ethan, who asks, how life-saving has Trey Waynes been for us on special teams this year?
Oh, he's been a standout on special teams, and I think that the very first play of this most recent game against Chicago, he deserves a lot of credit after Leonard Walsh kind of attempted to tackle the kick returner, and being a kicker could not do it, and the Trey Waynes kind of saved it. And that's not been the only situation that Trey Waynes has been good on. He's been a really good punt gunner this year. And he's been, pretty good in kickoff coverage too. So yeah, I know Trey Waynes has been great. The question I think is, what would happen if Josh Robinson didn't get suspended or whatever, and he played instead of Trey Waynes. And I think that Josh Robinson has been so good on special teams overall that if there was a drop-off, it wouldn't be that significant. But I think that unfairly diminishes Trey Waynes' performance on special teams this year because, he's been better than most of the other people on special teams. So, yeah, I think that at least when it comes to defensive type special teams play, I think that, when it comes to like kickoff returns and stuff like that, you don't see Trey Waynes on the field. But when it comes to like defensive type special teams play, Trey Waynes has been really phenomenal. So, yeah, he's been great.
That is going to be it for Morse Code this week. We have a special episode that'll be coming out here on either Christmas Day or the day after. A little clip show, has some stuff from the beginning of the year, some outtakes, a fair amount of swearing. There's been a lot of swearing in the episodes I've been going through for some of the off the air stuff. So warning about that, but should be really good, should be really funny. We make fun of Dusty a lot. You can tell who's putting the show together because there's a lot of Dusty making fun of. There's a lot of Dusty fun in there, so I like that personally. But we have some good stuff, and I'm still putting it together right now. So this is your last chance to send any sort of message about how, or a specific clip that you feel should be on the show for the end of the year show. So you can do that one of two ways. You can send us an email at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us. You can tweet to Arif at Arif Hassan NFL. You can tweet to Dusty at Dusty O'Connell. And you can tweet to myself at Big Mono or at the Norse Code Twitter account, Norse Code DN. If you would like to donate to our show and help us keep the lights on, you can do so at norsecodepodcast.com. There's a link at the bottom of the page. You can click on that and click on the donate button. And by doing so, it'll take you to a little PayPal page, and you can enter in your email address, sign in, and all that fun stuff. Or you can send us money as a Patreon user, as somebody who's helping contribute to the show and helping it go to help us get like a sustaining member. So you can do it one of those two different ways. If you'd like to harass us, please harass us. We do like talking to our guests and our listeners on Twitter. So that's gonna be it for the show. Arif, do you have any parting shots?
No, I think we're good. I think I'm just excited to see the Vikes win in prime time.
It'll be different. I'm excited for the possibility of a potential win. Or if we show up and it turns into the Cardinals game, fine. But it'd be really nice to see this sort of performance that we've laid out the last 2 weeks against a team that we on paper should just straight up murder. It'd be nice if we just pull this out and put ourselves in a situation where we have a really good shot at winning the division against the Packers and show them a team that they did not play against a few weeks ago. Like, this is a completely different team that's going on.
That would be really nice. Yeah,
really nice to shut up the Packers fans in our homes. It'd be really nice to do that. I feel like that got personal all of a sudden. I didn't really mean to get all that personal, but here we are. So for
That's
Arif,
a fan podcast.
Yeah, it's a fan podcast. A fan podcast with a producer who lives with a Packers fan. Damn shame. So for Arif, for Dusty, I am James. Thank you again for listening. And our formula is this: keep Teddy alive. And we will see you next week. Enjoy the clip show.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this: we go out, we hit people in the mouth.